Hi folks, this is Wormatty. Today we're testing DR Dynamic V1B2. I've said this previously, I'm not a fan of top-down activator corridors. I find them difficult to use. My view of the runners is limited, it's more difficult to press the buttons. I also recommend against the use of free run modes these days. I think it's better to let the activator decide when they want to do a free run. And they can just not press the buttons. If they do press the buttons, that's how you know they're not a nice person. It's called Honor. And I think, given the fact that most rounds in Deathrun are typically only about half an hour to 45 minutes, each round is something like 6 to 8 minutes, you only have a small number of rounds. Only a small number of players get to play activator. And so if even one of those rounds is a free run, it means that a large percentage of your game time is given over to free runs, and the map is not actually being played as it should.
Victory.
Dead.
Bombs away!
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Bit of a problem, that first trap. It's very narrow. All the players are going to be going through it. This trap looks unfair. I think 2 people died there. Are you using like a point explosion or a trigger hurt to explode the people there? Because the point explosion radius might be a little bit on the large side, but it only killed 2 people, so it's not too bad, I guess. This section over here kind of encourages people to investigate, because it's like, you know, it's off the beaten path. I actually prefer the glass without any reflections. I don't like that Team Fortress 2 security glass. I think it's ugly. It's used much too often, and the reflections and the light on it are often very ugly. I think reflections can work nicely if you reflect something that looks nice. But if you're just reflecting white walls and shit, it looks ugly. Trap seems a bit unfair. Quite a large trap zone. Doesn't appear to be a way to avoid dying.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I left a lot of feedback, and none of it appears to have been addressed.
Erecting a dispenser.
I can see the thing over here, that's good. Yeah, I previously said that if players can't see what they're going for, then they're not going to understand what's going on. So you can see the battery over there, which is fine, but in the corner you can't see it unless you go over these platforms here. So I would change things so that there's actually a way to see what you're going for, so you know what it is you're going for, and you also know whether or not it's been picked up or taken or whatever. And if you use TF Glow entity to put an outline over gameplay objectives, then that makes them impossible to miss. I also said to put a clip brush here on this vent entrance, so you could just crawl into it rather than having to crouch jump. I said I advise not to use training annotations because they appear for everyone regardless of where they are, so they can appear out of context. They disappear too quickly, you can't control how long they stay on the screen. They obstruct players' views. They disappear before you have a chance to understand what it is they're referring to. And that you should try and use signage and obvious visual cues to try and get people to work out what's going on. So for instance, in the case of the batteries, you could have a door with 2 cables going to it and 2 places to insert batteries. You could have like a power level meter that had red or something, you know.
Pyro, Miss Pauling here.
Like an ammeter or something that was too low. Easy stuff to do, like you could say spare batteries needed, or it has a sign that says spare batteries this way or whatever. That's detailing though. So training annotations are fine for alpha until you've got assets down, but you should try and make it obvious what to do using detailing
That sniper's a spy.
rather than explaining using text. People haven't got time to stand around trying to read instructions, you know, it should be obvious what's happening. There's also the fact that when people play this map over and over again, they're going to know exactly what to do, so having the text on screen in their face is also going to be a bit of an annoyance. Another thing to bear in mind is that if you have the same objectives to complete on each round, people know exactly what to do, and so they just go straight for the objectives, like the batteries and so on. If you're a new player, you don't know what to do, you never have the opportunity to find out, because people who are ahead of you are just racing ahead, doing things that need to be done. And these new players, or people who are behind, they never get the opportunity to do the fun mechanic, you know? So if you are going to put in little side quests and stuff, you should try and find ways for other people to involve themselves or be required to do something, you know, if possible. Just a thought. Oh,
Well, don't
it
that
didn't die.
beat all?
Oh, that was actually that was supposed to be what you was. That was the intended destination. I thought that if they fell down that out that vent, they would die. To be honest, it didn't look like that was where you're supposed to go. Is it supposed to be like in Half-Life where the vent breaks and then you find yourself in a different area? Yeah, fair enough. You want to use like metal jibs in that case. A funk breakable would be probably best to use, and then you can send it the brake input. It would have brake jibs,
Much obliged.
and it would also provide the sound effect for the braking as well.
Well, don't that beat all?
Yeah. And I take it you'll be doing like a sound pass as well at some point in the detailing stage. Because you obviously need like ambient sounds here and stuff as well. And fire jet sounds. I think I also said in the previous version that it doesn't really make sense for fire to be coming out of pipes, so you might want to consider using something like steam. Or maybe bursts of lava or something, I don't know. I mean, it really depends exactly why there's lakes of lava everywhere anyway, I suppose. Slag.
Give them hell, boys!
All of you are dead!
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Fight to the death.
Yeah, that's a good point actually. All the shit that I said last time won't have come up on the client demo. Because I was the only person to give a client demo, unfortunately. Despite me asking. Yep.
Pyro, hauling here. Something just came up.
Yeah, that's a very unfair trap. When people hesitate in front of a trap, it means they're just waiting for somebody to give their life to it. You want to avoid that as much as possible. You want to make people feel like they can go into a trap with, like, and make them feel like there's a chance they can avoid dying in some way. Either that, you can do that by, like, having ways to avoid dying using skill, or you could kind of tinker with the trap zones a little bit. So you could, for instance, have 2 sets of stickies, and so there's a gap in the middle where if people were, you know, quick enough or whatever, they could stand in the middle and avoid dying. Except for the fact that they'd fall in the water there, which wouldn't really help, but whatever. Also, this water, like, it doesn't look particularly dangerous, so if I were to jump in it, I would expect to be able to swim or get carried away, rather than just dying. Yeah, if you've got like a valve or something, you probably want to make it rotate and have sound effects when people touch it. And you want to draw attention to it in some way, like Salvador said. One thing you could do is, rather than just having signage and stuff and notices, you could actually use detailing to indicate what's going to happen. So if, for instance, you saw like a drain, you could have a massive pipe coming away from the drain, and then a valve handle which would open the drain. Or maybe you could have some water flowing into that area, and the valve will be connected to the water inlet, so when people rotated the valve, it would turn the water off. The only problem is, of course, that you require a hell of a lot of water to fill that area up, and also huge drains. So having a tiny valve handle doesn't make a lot of sense. So you could instead have like a digital flow control system or whatever, or a lever. But I like the idea of turning valves, to be honest. It's fun. You could even have multiple valves to turn. Like, say, 4 or 5 valves in different places, and then that would give multiple people things to do. It wouldn't always be the first person to arrive. And if there are only a small number of players, then they get to turn 5 valves, which is fun. You probably also want to use, like, melee to turn the valves as well. Like, put a button over them rather than a trigger. Because the act of actually hitting the button is more interesting, say, than going up and just being present in front of it.
I'm moving this.
The only downside to that is that players can shoot the button from a distance, but there are ways around that. You can use a filter to filter out anything but melee damage.
Go on, get.
Or you can lock the button and then use touch activates to unlock it, and then accept damage and so on and so on. A bit more complicated. Or set the spawn flag so it can use damage to activate it. If you'd like information about that, speak to us after the playtest. I've actually set that system up already in another map, so I can just copy and paste it. He's 80, he's about to leave some feedback. Yeah. See, in Bank, in the vault area, there's a vent that leads out of the vault. And when I went over Bank for Werewolf, I put a couple of clip brushes either side of the vent entrance there, one on the left, one on the right. So when you stood in front of it and you did a crouch jump, you would just go straight into the vault. Because the problem was that you would miss the vault entrance when you were trying to jump at it. What's the problem that's preventing the trigger hertz from working? Oh, that's interesting. Ah! The Rua was able to avoid dying to that trap because they were quick enough. Well done. Although there's no indication that doors will appear there, so you probably want to do something about that with detailing. Like, have doors, and you can see them, and then you could have, like, wires going to them, and having a sign saying, danger, equipment starts and stops automatically, so people know that there's a door there. Because if a door just appears out of nowhere, it's not very fair. The Rua died for some reason. They were both killed by motivator hurt, but I didn't see any motivator. Indeed.
Nope.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Begin.
Incredibly intelligent people like Eggman don't have time to be certified, to be honest. Well, one thing you could do there is have more than one trigger hertz and have like 2 different sizes and just enable them and disable them as needed. Another thing to do is you could have large trigger hertz over certain sections of the map, so split the map into like 3 sections or something, and then when the motivator goes past one section you could enable the trigger hertz and therefore purge anybody who's left behind it. Sanitizing the area was the term I used in Castle Studio. Another thing to consider is that you don't always have to use like path track motivators and stuff. One thing I'd like to do in a Deathrun map, if ever I make one, is to use like closing off zones and stuff. So as you progress through the map, you have like doors separating each zone, and they're on a timer. And then if you get trapped in a zone whilst the door, when the door closes, you die somehow. Yeah, I haven't decided how. Maybe there's like a security system. Maybe you get struck by lasers. It could be gas. You know, maybe it depends on the area. Maybe an area like this, the water could rise. You could have different hazards in each area. Or maybe you could have an area which is entirely water-based, so people are always walking through water, and then suddenly it gets electrified.
Go, go, go! all.
It's interesting to note that we only saw the motivator right at the end there. In fact, we didn't even see it, did we, to be honest? I don't think I've ever seen the motivator myself. Did you? Like looking at the Loch Ness Monster, I suppose.
Come on, hit it, Doc.
The thing about these side quests is that people can just kind of stay in the middle here and then not engage, and they can let other people do all the work. I was able to insert the battery that somebody else picked up. That's fun. You guys go and get the batteries, I'll insert them for you. Yeah, or a message on the screen or something. You could even have a screen overlay. Like a material, you know, have like 2 battery boxes or something, and when each battery is picked up, you could say like, just a couple of game text entries, I suppose, maybe, I don't know. Yeah. Yay! Somehow we were able to get through. Ah, because Salvador went to get it. And now Salvador's right at the end. That's their reward. I think if you're going to have side quests and stuff, the people who actually do the work should receive some benefit. Maybe, for instance, they get to go forwards first or something. So, rather than it being a dead end, maybe there could be like a passageway at the end or something that brings them slightly further forward or whatever. I do like the idea of going to collect batteries, but I think you just need to kind of put a bit more thought into how it works. Like, here's an example. Imagine if you had to pick up like a battery, or 2 batteries. And each kind of little side quest was a section of Deathrun course that everybody had to go through. So there was like no chance of anybody being able to stay behind. And then at some point along that route, you'd be able to pick up the battery. And the battery would be, say, at the top of a set of challenging platforms or whatever. And then you'd be able to continue on that route. But you wouldn't be able to leave the route until somebody had picked up the battery. So you could opt to kind of ignore the battery and just continue on the rest of the routes. But you would not be able to leave the route until at least somebody had picked up the battery, which means you'd have to go back and pick it up or whatever. But you'd also then be forcing everyone to go through that Deathrun route. This is an interesting area that appears to have no purpose. I see. The problem is, if you create kind of side areas and stuff, if you give people things to explore, it's pretty much guaranteed they're going to spend time exploring them. So you have to kind of balance that, really. If you have a secret that requires somebody to go down a particular alleyway or go through somewhere, then people are going to go down it, so it's a surefire thing that people are going to detect the secret. Whereas if you have an alleyway that doesn't have anything in it, People are always going to go down it anyway, because it's just something extra to do. People like to make their own fun. I like the idea of encouraging exploration. But it's tricky, because if you do that, then you kind of encourage people to not play Deathrun. And it's kind of important to have people actually play the course, because otherwise it's left to only a small number of players then to go and trigger the traps, whilst everybody else has a lovely time of it just wandering the map at their leisure, not experiencing any hazards or anything. Although to be fair, there are a good amount of static hazards in this map. Environmental hazards, things like that. I'm sucking at this game.
Pyro, Holland here. I need something done. Quietly.
Jonathan clearly feels that this trap is unfair. There's a trap in safety first, a vent drop, but the drop is only like a single vent tile. So there's actually a chance of avoiding that one. Because, of course, the player's collision hull is like 64 units or something. So you could stand on the edge of the drop and you wouldn't fall in. If it was, say, 128 units wide. At least you've actually put hazard strips there, which is good, but... My approach to trap design these days is a bit different. When you make a Deathrun map, I'll speak later because I'm interrupted. Oh. You might want to pick up the bomb. Oh, there's a force field there. For some reason, the force field covering the bomb area was a little bit more difficult to see. Yeah, I think I mentioned in the previous playtest that your force field materials, they appear to be like light map generic, which means they receive light from the world. They don't appear to be self-illuminated.
Fight to the death.
So they don't actually have their own kind of emission or appearance of emission. So you probably want to either make them full bright or use self-illume. So ask us after the playtest and we'll talk about that. I'll make a thread for feedback now.
Alrighty then. Spy in our midst.
Very good!
The engineer is a spy.
Hey, thanks!
That pyro's a spy.
Thanks, mate!
I did all I could.
Ow! Ow!
Good night, Irene.
There we are. I think that force field texture is actually pretty good. It just needs a little bit of tweaking, that's all. I don't think it would require you to modify the texture itself. It would just require you to change some material parameters. But I'm very experienced with material parameters and stuff, so I'd easily be able to kind of improve it for you. Even proxies, in fact. I'm very good at material proxies these days. I'm very good at material proxies. It really doesn't matter. I mean, somebody can create a texture, a VTF, and you can use it in any way you want, depending on the license they've given you. I mean, how did you get the texture anyway? Was it from TF2 maps or something? Oh, there you go. The license is kind of implied there, like it's free for personal use or whatever, so you can modify it with no issues. I mean, the texture itself would remain the same, wouldn't it? The only thing that would change is how it's used in the game. You could argue that that's up to the author anyway, I mean... nobody cares. I mean, just look at the average Deathrun map. Anyway, yeah, what was I saying earlier on? My approach to trap design these days is a bit different. I don't really know how to describe it. I don't like kind of going, right, how many traps do I need to make? Oh, I'll put a trap here, I'll put a trap there, and so on. Oh, I need to have 10 traps. Oh, I think I need to put a trap in this area. What I tend to like doing now is kind of think about the theme. Think about the kinds of hazards the theme would have. Think about the kinds of areas the theme would have. Fuck. And then design hazards to kind of complement the theme. And also think about the progression of the players through the map, like write a story. So the goal, for instance, is to escape a facility or whatever. How would they do that? How would they navigate the facility to get to the end, for instance? Is the goal clear? And then you find that the traps are easier to design, and if you plan this all on paper beforehand, then the traps kind of make more sense where they're positioned. You also need to think about trap difficulty as well, so start off easy and get more difficult as time goes on, you know. But to be fair, you've actually adopted a similar approach in this map. I mean, you've got clearly identifiable zones. You've got like a kind of a conveyor area, which is very interesting. You've got like a lava area. You've got like a security area. What I'd like to see is for these zones to kind of have stronger identities and to be used more often. Like, I really like the idea of this conveyor area, and I think you could really make more use of that. Because I think it's a really interesting concept. So if, for instance, the conveyors and stuff from the slag area, if you were able to kind of make more obstacles and activities that were based on that, that would be pretty cool. So maybe you could introduce an element of user control. Maybe part of the objective would be to have some slag go to a certain area, get dumped on something, and then like melt it, you know. Perhaps what you could also do is kind of have a consequence to a couple of actions. Don't worry about respawning, I can do that.
Help me!
Parkour?
Incoming! Incoming!
For some reason it's rather jerky. Is it me, or is it really kind of laggy and or jerky when I'm going backwards and forwards? Yeah. Strange. Obby start platform is a funk brush. Maybe it's some kind of physics collision or something. These flames look a little bit difficult to... it's difficult to see defined edges because the particles are bending. Oh my god, they're rather quick. It's more difficult to see the blue flames because they're quite narrow, and I think it's difficult to judge the speed of them. You want to add some sound effects to these rocket spawners as well. Nothing over the top, nothing loud, but just something that serves as a cue. So for instance, when you're doing something that depends heavily on timing, you've got visual cues, things that people can use to time their own actions with, but you've also got audible cues as well, sound effects which people can use to kind of judge timing based on that, you know? So you can focus on jumping then and just listen for the sound effects.
That's
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Fight!
Hello, Crummy.
going.
Well, when you go to test your map, personally, load Team Fortress 2, and then enable Developer 1, and then load the map, and then look at the console. And if you've got any issues with sound effects not working, it will come up in there. It'll tell you the reason why they're not working. So sometimes it might be that you've given the sound name incorrectly, or maybe you've... I don't know. That's basically every possible solution there. You don't actually have to use 41 kHz, or 44.1 kHz rather. Source Engine supports 44, 22 and 11. So which frequency range you use is up to you. But typically, either 44 or 11 are best to use. For instance, I was doing some work for Sir Trooper recently because he wanted to convert Duke Nukem 3D assets, and I was looking at the best way to convert the sound effects, and I discovered that the sound effects original format of 11 kHz is actually the best to use. Because when you play an 11 kHz sound in the Source Engine, it actually makes the sound much better. So if you convert it to a 44 kHz sound, there's actually no benefit whatsoever, and it increases the size of the file by like 4 times. So 11 kHz is actually a really good way to keep sound files. It does 44.1 kHz. You're thinking of 48s. Well, I believe the game engine plays sound frequencies in different ways. So, for instance, it always plays sounds at 44 kHz. So if you feed it a 22 kHz sound, it will double the rate itself naturally to 44 kHz. But I have a theory that because the game engine is so old, it has special ways to handle 11 kHz sound. Because obviously back in the old days, loads of sound files were 11 kHz to save file space. And so it kind of upscales the sounds in a way. So I think we've pretty much tested most of the traps, haven't we? So endings, I guess, is the only thing we need to check. Would you agree, Ciaran? Oh yeah, definitely. I actually had I created a text file recently. So remind me on and I'll send it to you. That's a good point, Salvador, yeah. It does feel a little bit long. Maybe you want to kind of slim things down a little bit. Maybe what you should do is kind of focus on keeping the strong themes. Oh, I can't get in. I'm stuck. Stuck in the doors. Door's stuck. Oh, there's more than... we're both here now, interesting. So what haven't we played?
The medic is a spy. Cheers, mate! Cheers, mate! Freaking demo's a spy!
Spinner got reworked, so we try Spinner then.
Cheers, mate! You're doing good, lad! Incoming!
It's going clockwise. Oh, I like the fact that it's starting off nice and slow, but it's a bit difficult to see this red spinner against the floor. So you'll want to use a contrasting colour for that, like metal or something. I'll teleport to the end.
That heavy's a spy.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Fight!
Thanks, mate.
Go, go, go.
Yep. Oh yeah. Thanks. I just had to construct my set pos command in a text document. Yeah, so maybe you want to have themes which are a bit stronger, easier to identify. Okay, we're going to use the spinner, so try not to die Arctic. I'll give it God mode if Ciaran asks me to. Oh, for fuck's sake, come on! Honestly. Weirdos activator next.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Stand outside spawns, the music stat doesn't
Fight
happen.
to the
Okay.
death.
Alright. Just for future reference, if you insert a point teleport entity at the end and name it something like teleport test, then we can use it to just teleport ourselves straight there.
There's a spy creeping around here.
Therefore bypassing the whole course. I gave him at the start. What are you doing? Are you shooting us? What the fuck? Why am I dead? Oh, I touched the thing, okay. Of course, it's a spinner, I forgot about that.
Pyro, they're calling here.
Yeah, you'll want to put a block bullets between your between the two sides of the spinner, at least. But I did notice that the wall is a front brush, so we'll see what happens. Just a heads up, by the way, instead of using a Funk no build, you can change the spawn flag of your trigger hurt to everything, and that also attacks buildables as well. It does the same amount of damage to them. So let's say a sentry has 300 health and your trigger hurt does 150 damage per tick, or per half-second tick. That means it will take 2 ticks of damage from the trigger hurt to kill a sentry. So if you wanted to, you could give engineers the opportunity to like erect a sentry or a dispenser and stand on top of it, but it would be dead in a couple of rotations or whatever. Or you can just jack it up high enough to destroy any buildings so they're wasting the metal. Why has the floor disappeared? We can stand on the lava floor for some reason. Jesus, I think the spinner itself is moving much too quickly to also have the wall moving as well. Yeah, if you're going to have the wall move, you should have the spinner moving at a slower speed, because this is much too difficult. The spinner moving at that speed on its own is difficult enough.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Begin.
Good side of you. Get to it. Need a dispenser here.
Much obliged.
Need a dispenser.
Also, bear in mind that a minigame is supposed to be mini, so you might want to have like a maximum time limit on your games of say 2 minutes or something. Because the longer a minigame lasts, then the fewer rounds are going to be played. Humiliation?
Left. Need a dispenser.
Oh, there's 3 of them.
Go on, get.
Oh, we tested this last time, didn't we?
There you go. The sniper is a spy.
Let me guess.
Very nice. Is there anything else that he's testing here?
Flawless victory. Now do it again.
I am not the only spy. The engineer is a spy.
5.
We tested the humiliations last time, so we don't really need to test it this time.
Sentry up there. Play ball.
Fight to the death.
Okay, I mean, if you really think it's necessary to test humiliations,
Talking about.
we can do that.
Is a spy. The pyro is a spy.
Alright, has anybody got any feedback they'd like to leave before we go on to the next map?
Dominic is a spy. Spy here. Medic.
Okay, well there's a thread on the playtesting channel that you can use to put your feedback in. Yeah. For my own part, I would say you've used a version suffix, a normal version suffix, which indicates that this is in a release state, but to my mind, the detailing is kind of alpha beta. As Creador says, a lot of the early detailing is all pretty plain, but it gets better as it goes on. I think it's fine enough, but you could probably work on doing a bit more fine detail and stuff, maybe experimenting with lighting and so on.
The demo man is rock, paper, scissors.
I've really hit.
Medic.
Music Killer Relay. No such entity by that name.
Nine.
Yeah. Hey.
So as I was saying earlier on, I like the idea of having like different zones and stuff, you know, but I think the zones need to have stronger, distinct identities from one another.
Hey.
So this is what I'd call like the concrete area, really. I'm not entirely sure what the purpose of the facility is. It could be some kind of maintenance area, so maybe you want to work on improving, like, you know, selling that theme a bit better. The Lavery factory thing is pretty cool, and I think that's perhaps the most memorable and most interesting area, but I think you're underutilising the area, personally. I do like the idea of kind of transitioning from one area to the other via servicing tunnels and stuff like this. Because it kind of feels like you're making your own path through the facility, you know? Rather than just kind of using doors and stuff, so that's pretty cool. It's some stuff like that you see in Portal and Half-Life. But I think again, in future, if you were to improve the detailing a bit, you know, use more distinct textures for each area, like these slag things, they're using diamond plate metal, which is usually used on floors because it's grippy. It's not used on like giant lava buckets or whatever, or steel buckets. Foundries, there you go. Also, foundries have, like, if you look at videos and stuff about foundries, you'll find that it's a lot of inspiration to draw. Typically they're quite dark places, quite red, lots of sparks, lots of mess everywhere, lots of safety, lots of massive machinery, etc. This area here kind of feels a bit, what is it? It's just a bunch of pipes, you know? So maybe you could kind of work on this being like another transition area where we're going where we're not supposed to go. And we're going into a nondescript corridor. It's like the concepts are here. You know, you've got the basic concept, which is fantastic for an alpha map, but they haven't yet been, you know, polished or whatever. Definitely a very strong start, I'd say, so do continue to work on the map. And also consider difficulty ramping as well. So starting off with easy traps and then getting gradually more difficult over time. And also consider the quantity of players. So at the very beginning of the map, you'll have the most players alive, they'll all be together. And then as time goes by, you'll have a reduced number of players, so you'll have traps which are designed for smaller numbers of players and so on, you know. So with that, I will go on to Minecraft Lands by request of Arctic Dino, I think, was it? Yeah, don't have stuff harder at the beginning, because you'll do what I did in Steamworks Extreme. The second trap, the oven trap, is a really interesting concept, but unfortunately loads of people die to it, so like 50% of the players are dead by the second trap. That's a huge jump in difficulty.
Hey buddy, it's Pauling.
Boomwood, yeah, thanks. And don't underestimate like the challenge that some people have on difficult traps. You can have a trap which is like just a couple of platforms that you jump between, and people will still fuck it up. So you absolutely must have incredibly easy traps for people, you know, who just aren't very good players, like. And if you expand your range to incorporate those very easy traps, then it means you can kind of drag the experience out a little bit. A player's progression through a map is kind of like the way they measure their own personal progress and getting better at the map. If on every round they complete one more trap, they get a little bit closer to the end on each round, it means they get a sense of progression. They feel like they're improving, you know? And with that in mind as well, I'll just say one more thing before we go on to the next map. If somebody gets to the end of a map and everybody automatically gets teleported, it often means that people don't get the chance needed or the time needed to kind of complete the map for themselves, so they often don't get to play the later traps, and it can be quite unfair. So sometimes it's a good idea to have like a buffer zone. Think what PlayStation does. When you get to the end of that map, you have the boss fight, don't you, with Zerg? Well, that's kind of a pooling system. Gives people a chance to catch up. And by the end, people are all pretty much in that boss area.
Incoming.
You have the same kind of thing with that that kind of bomb puzzle, but you still have a motivator in there, so it doesn't really feel like a kind of a pooling system. It just feels like a way to cap off the map with a bunch of actions which you perform in the same order. So try and think about some ways to kind of pool people together at the end. Yeah, so Minecraft Lands. Apparently, it's got some issues or something according to Wormwood, so I'm not entirely sure what those issues are. So the next map test on Minecraft Land is going to be primarily for bug hunting. So do your best to look for bugs and exploits. If you find you can't connect to the server or the map crashes your game,
Splendid.
then report that in the playtesting channel. I'll make a thread for the map, and it may just mean that you can't connect to the map testing session for that map, in which case for you the test will be over. If you get any errors, then please take screenshots of them and write them in the playtesting thread as well, so we can feed that back to the map author and try and track down the cause of the problems. I tell you what you can do as well, guys. You can enable Developer 1 in console, which is like that. But before you do that, start logging your console like this. So if you type con_log file minecraftlands.log in console, that'll begin logging your console. And then once you've done that, you can enable Developer 1, or if you prefer, Developer 3, which shows console variable changes as well. And that'll begin logging everything that happens. The only thing is, this map has like an issue. Tell you what, let me see if I can fix that issue. There you go. I've killed the fizz boxes, so you can enable Developer 1 and Developer 3 now. There we go. And I'll change map now.